Folks, welcome to So Bad It's Good, presented by Betches Media. Today, we have, to me, a legend in reality television, but also he has done so much more with his life. You have grown to love him over the years on shows like Laguna Beach and The Hills, but we've also seen his personal story and his battle with addiction. And, he has done so much important work with people in this space that I just, every time I see a clip of him, I'm always kind of so proud and I always take something from it. And I love to see how people will start on reality series and how they grow. And I think this dude has just grown into such a great man. And today we are here to also talk about this innovative alcohol detection tool, which we'll talk about, called Sober Sure, I believe. But the one and only Jason Wahler is here with us today. Jason, welcome to the show.
Hey, Ryan, thank you so much for having me, man. What an intro. Appreciate it. Grateful to be here.
I mean, it's got to blow you away because people have so much love for you because of this time in their life that they grew up watching you on television. And, has it been a net positive overall?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, going through it, in the thick of things when I was struggling in my active addiction, I probably would have had a different response. But, it's amazing to kind of see where this is turned into. And my greatest deficits have become my greatest assets, right? Everything that I'd gone through allowed me the opportunity to be who I am and where I'm at today. And so, yes, it has definitely become a net positive thing. And, I never thought ever that I'd be in this position that I am now, being able to reflect back on everything that I went through, to be able to shed light and be a beacon of hope for those that are lost, and to be able to shed share my personal experience, strength, and hope. And it's been absolutely incredible. I love the opportunity that I've been given, and I wouldn't change anything.
Yeah. Watching you on that show and how you were and how you are now, like, how did you, first off, dealing with an addiction, and the way you did, obviously learning these things about yourself and triggers and things like that. But then how do you learn to be a spokesperson at the same time and help others? Like, when did you realize that you had that potential gift as well?
Addiction is obviously very cunning, baffling, and powerful. And, I realized after doing as much work as I've done now that I struggled with the symptoms of addiction way before I ever picked up a drink or a drug. And what I mean by that is at 12, 13 years old, severely struggling with mental health issues, anxiety, depression, a lot of those areas that I was struggling with. And at the age of 12 or 13 years old, I struggled severely with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, where I'd wash my hands until they would bleed. And literally I'd have to put on neoprene gloves at night and, with Neosporin on them.
At 13 years old.
At 13 years old. And so what was crazy though about that whole journey and that experience that I went through is at that age, on the outside, I was perceived as like a popular kid. I was athletic, I was outgoing, and and that's what what the public perceived me as. But behind closed doors, I was this kid that was struggling severely with this stuff. And so at that time, I was already starting to live a double life, right? And so parents were very supportive, had the most amazing mom and dad and siblings. Saw a lot of different therapists, a lot of different psychiatrists, was put on medication. It helped mitigate the symptoms, but I never dealt with the underlying issues. And fast forward a few years, I find alcohol and I'm like, who needs medication, dude? This is where it's at. And so I think really to answer your question, after I just kind of went through that long little rabbit hole, is through a lot of my life experiences, I've been able to kind of really do the deep work, because it's been 20 plus years now that I've been dealing with this. And that's what's crazy is I was just doing a show with my wife and we were just talking about that. It's like, even though I have 5 years of sobriety again, in December, I took 5 years again, had a gnarly relapse. There's a whole long story that's there.
I remember, yeah.
But it's like, it's crazy to look back that like I've been dealing with all of this stuff for 20 plus years to get me to where I'm at today. And so I think really inserting myself, being at a place where I was willing to get honest, I was willing to surrender, take guidance and direction, it really allowed me an opportunity to get to know myself and to really understand what I had gone through, and that there's a lot of people out there that go through this, that creates this path now for me to speak upon it, right? And it's not like I'm not a doctor, I'm not a clinician, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a therapist.
No, your boots on the ground. You've dealt actively with this
lived experience. And somebody told me, I think it's important. We obviously need professionals, we need clinicians, we need doctors and stuff like that. But sometimes the best experts are the ones with the lived experience, right? Because it creates that relatability and that connectivity with those that are going through it. And so, my saying that I say around my story is, by expressing vulnerability, it creates humility, right? And so the more that we can open up and share it takes away the stigma that's associated with it. And so by naturally just doing that, it's kind of evolved into this what it has today. It was just by being willing to get open and honest, and not hide stuff that is there. And obviously it makes it challenging. I wasn't really given the choice either to have this be kept behind closed doors, And I mean,
well, that's also the thing with reality television too, is that you have a celebrity, you have this thing where there is this spotlight on you, and I imagine that's almost like having like ankle weights around you as you're working out, because you have this added pressure of like, we're so curious about you. You're like, we are in this public eye, so that's an added thing that most people don't have to go through.
No, it was such a weird thing because, I mean, keep in mind, I mean, for the listeners, but this was all back in like 2005, right? I mean, this was like cable television, newspapers, and some tabloids. There was no Netflix, there was no Hulu, there was no, streaming services and stuff. And so this was just like, it was all new, and it was so unexpected. I mean, I was a high school kid living in Laguna Beach, loved playing baseball, and that's what I wanted to pursue. The show comes up, and then overnight my life completely changes. You know what I mean? And so it was one of those things where it was crazy. I mean, especially where I was at mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. Yeah. I mean, you're talking to a guy that had an overinflated ego with an underestimated sense of self-worth, trying to deal with his underlying issues, and then be thrown on this television show that blows up. It just added fuel to the fire.
Oh, I can't imagine. I mean, people are telling you you're hot all the time. You're like a bad boy vibe. You got all this stuff. Like, it's got to feed that ego so much that like any problem that you actually are dealing with, it just is going to exacerbate that internally. So
it just suppressed everything that I needed to deal with, because the outside influence was helping me create this false sense of reality of everything, and addiction and alcoholism and all those. It's a disease of denial, right? And so I have all these outside influences helping me kind of be like, hey, this isn't
you're amazing, dude. You're on top of the world.
When you created a character. I mean, like, for me, it's like I lost so much sight of who I was. And, I look back like who I was when I grew up as a child, just loved being outdoors, surfing, skating, snowboarding, just being very active. And, even by 19, 20 years old, I'd lost sight of so much of who I was, stopped doing the things that I'd loved, and was just so into this pursuant of what was being, what was being portrayed of me. And it was this this life of the party, outgoing individual. And I basically just went down this path, it was very deep and dark, and took me away from the things that I really loved, man. And
but now you're here, you have a family, you inspire people. And I want to ask more about the reality part in a second, but I wanted to talk about this, the Sober Sure, really quickly before I forget, because this is this alcohol detection tool. Can you explain this to me, what this is and how you think this actually helps people going through or battling what you've battled in the past?
Yeah, so Sober Safe is an amazing company I've been working with for the last year and a half. It is the first transdermal alcohol monitoring detection band. So there's Sober Sure, which is the band, and Sober Safe is the parent company. There's two products that they have. One is a stationary device, and then one is an actual wearable. And so it's been incredible. I mean, the stationary device it basically looks like a big mouse. You put your hand on it, and within 10 seconds or less, it will identify who you are through biometrics, and then identify if you're sober or not. So a lot of people are using that within the treatment industry. People that operate and utilize heavy machinery. There's so many different ways, but the band, which I love about is again, it's not only is it alcohol monitoring, it's GPS tracking, it's band removal notification, and it really allows the opportunity for individuals to redevelop and establish a sense of safety and connection and reestablishing trust when it comes to loved ones. For example, there's individuals that I've worked with. I'll just use a real life story. There's a person that, a mother that was trying to reestablish trust with the husband. She was drinking and driving and stuff within the kids. And so after she went to treatment, actually arrested the disease, got stabilized. Part of the deal when she came out was to have this band be a part of her, her aftercare. And it reinstilled and allowed the husband not to have to micromanage and oversee everything, but it ensured that she was sober, one, but also when she was dealing with the kids. And so it was allowing them to reestablish trust, create connection again, and ultimately providing safety for the family. Another story that's really interesting that we've utilized this in is for parents who have kids that are going to treatment, and the parents are still supporting them, whether they're paying their car payment, their cell phone, they're paying for their rent, whatever it may be. parents can utilize this to ensure that, like, hey, look, obviously we love you, we care about you, we want to support you, but we need you to ensure that you're doing your part you're keeping your side of the street clean and you're doing your part. And so we want you to wear this to ensure that you're maintaining and sustaining sobriety. And so there's so many different use cases that it's come into play. The courts are starting to get heavily involved with it. I'm really excited about this new side that we're taking to it from a prevention standpoint. For example, I have young kids right now. They're not old enough to drive, but you better believe if my daughter was in a position where she's like, hey, Dad, I want to go to the football game and hang out with some friends and stuff, hey, go for it. Wear the band.
Yes.
It prevents drunk driving and it ensures safety. And it's like, dude, it's not even a question now. But so if we can help save lives and create it's a lot less invasive and it's way more humane than like a breathalyzer.
It's like a Fitbit. It's like
I usually have it on. It looks just like a Fitbit. But it's an amazing tool, an amazing resource. And again, there's not a one size fits all model, right? And it's just another tool that people can access and utilize and resource to help create a longer term stint of sobriety. And that's even for people that are in recovery. Like if, in the early stages, when after relapse and being able to have something like this, one is it would have created safety for my wife and for her, but it also it allows you to get out of situations like, if you're at an event or you're going to something and it's like, dude, for those kids, right? It's like, I got this band on, I can't drink, you know what I mean? And so it's also could be a thing when it comes to peer pressure, getting them out of that.
Yeah. But guys, I'm going to put all the information in the show notes in case you're interested. But I think this is such an interesting tool and interesting times that we live in, that we have technology like this that can actually help for all of these instances. And I was reading this. I read Matthew Perry's autobiography a couple years ago, and rest in peace to him. And he said, your addiction is always in the corner doing one-armed push-ups, waiting for you to slip. For you to slip. And it was such a beautiful book. And unfortunately, it slipped for him in the end. And I know this is way too deep of a question I just met you 12 minutes ago. How much of that is still in your day-to-day life? We're obviously talking about this, but is it something that you actively are scared of on a day-to-day basis of what is the world going to present to me today? Or is it something that you are more in ownership and excited from?
No, that's a really good question. And, look, I mean, we have today, I have the right to make my own decisions, right? And I always say consistency and structure create safety. So I create a program for myself that I can lean into and that I can abide by. And so I don't have the fear, like, again, as I take this a day at a time, but I don't future trip or look down the road with it. But I know as long as I have my program in place and I keep it as my number one priority. And like I told my wife when we first met, and this is 14, 15 years ago, I said the highest priorities in my life is God, my sobriety, and then my family, right? Because if I don't have God and sobriety in order, nothing else lines up. And unfortunately, we got to kind of see that happen when I'd had that relapse. But I make sure that my program is my number one priority, and I keep that into play. And as long as that is in check, it's something that tends to treat me well.
I love it. Okay. So let's get to a little bit more fun, I guess, in a sense, let's go back to another time when you were on television. And can you speak to the love triangle with Lauren and Heidi back in the day? Do you have any could you walk through any of these moments or your relationship with LC and how it's grown through the years?
Yeah, so, I mean, well, my love for triangle, I think was Jessica and Alex was the one in high school. And then obviously I dated Lauren, but I mean, back then, dude, I was so lost with what I was going through. I mean, God, these girls are so sweet, such amazing people. I still talk to Jessica and Alex. I don't talk to
you were on Kristen Cavallari's podcast too recently.
Yeah. Kristen's here in Tennessee. We've developed and maintained a good friendship, and which is awesome. But I mean, honestly, man, back then was such a blur around what was going on. And honestly, I remember watching when Netflix picked up the show, like I think a year or two ago, we ended up putting on one of the episodes. I just couldn't believe, what was on. One, I don't know how the show did so well. I mean, I thought the show was not as good as what people thought, but I was a wreck. I mean, I was a complete train wreck, and to be able to walk you through the relationships and stuff like that, man, I was lucky to walk through the day, let alone remember what was going on in those relationships with everybody, but still have good rapport, good relationships with everybody. Some people I still talk to, some I don't.
Yeah, I was going to add, I mean, obviously, I'm here in Los Angeles and we, just survive. I mean, we're just getting through the fires, but, was it wild to see Spencer and Heidi, such tragedy, but all of a sudden it's just so bizarre. He gets this, he's always been this celebrity, but his celebrity kind of just increased in such a weird, different way. And it's just such a, your experience was, I mean, I remember the fight at the club you guys had back in the day and stuff. Was that so interesting for you? Like how aware of that were you in terms of Spencer and Heidi this last month?
I mean, I knew what had happened. Obviously, the fires are absolutely devastating. I cannot believe what everybody is going through up there. I mean, we've had friends, we've had family that have lost homes in that fire, and it's absolutely devastating. And my heart goes out to everybody. I think specifically when it comes to Spencer and Heidi, I think what they're able to do in that situation to develop support and rally everybody together is incredible. My heart goes out to them. I mean, they got a family, they lost, everything. They lost, a place where they're creating tons of memories. And I can't even imagine what it's like going through that, but it's just we're praying for everybody, man. And we're trying to do whatever we can. We're actually on one of the other things that I do is, and I'll mention it is I work with Dr. Amen and I help run his foundation, and specifically to the fires in Los Angeles. We're providing 100 scholarships, which is full comprehensive assessments and brain scans for first responders who specifically fought the fires, because we want to give back in any way, shape, and that we can. And, I mean, obviously a lot of people have gone through PTSD. There's a lot of, first responders that are going through just anxiety, depression, a lot of the stuff that they've seen. And so however we can support them in those areas, we want to do that. And so again, it's just such a tragic situation.
Yeah.
That everybody's going through. I hope everything's okay with you, Ryan. And
we had to evacuate one night. I mean, there was a Laurel Canyon fire that got started, but it was real. I'd never been in an experience like that. And luckily we were in the Palisades or Eaton, but it was so scary. I mean, I think, and this is going to be for years to come. It's about, all of the aftermath of this, like the fires are out, but we now have to deal with the rebuilding, which in a lot of ways, like you rebuilding your life over the years, it's like you have to put this hard work in, and it's so frustrating because you're like, why do we have to do it? But you can't ask why, you just got to do it. But I just thought the Spencer of it all is like, he's stayed here the whole time. Like he started out on the hills, all of this stuff. And to watch him get like his dream of getting 1 million followers on TikTok and two, but like he had to lose his home to get it. And I just thought how bizarre, but also you growing up with all of these people, do you still talk to Brody at all?
I've touched base with Brody like once or twice in the last 6 months, just simply checking in, saying hello, and just hearing how him and his new family's doing. I say I stay in a lot more contact with like Talon, Stephen Coletti. I stay in touch with Kristen. Obviously I see her often. Alex, Jessica, Alex.
Were you a part of that reunion? That they had recently? What didn't it, like just in the last couple of months, I saw them all in pictures together. Like Steven and
that was their so we were in different grades. That was their high school reunion. But like Kristen did a little reunion for Uncommon James when she was doing her shoot. Like there was a chunk of the cast from season 2 that came, which obviously a lot of us still stay in touch and communication. And from the hills, I mean, I'll still touch base with Frankie once in a while, and Audrina. But no, it's kind of like ever since we moved to Tennessee, we've really kind of focused on our family and just on our endeavors and what it is that we're doing. And I mean, we get back to California every once in a while, but it's like when we get back, I mean, as we all can understand, time is our most valuable asset. And it's so hard to keep up with all these different relationships,
Well, but isn't it funny? Like the audience that grew up on you, we want you to be like, we want you to be on a text thread every day. We want you still, like we want all of these things. We need you in a fight with Spencer tomorrow. And it is so funny. And it's like, but life does happen. Like you don't get to stay in this. And that's why it's so interesting that you have this part of your life on film, for better or worse, and we still quote these scenes like you were there like on the I Want to Forgive You scene, the famous scene, and I was like, you're in the background like Lauren and Spencer, and I'm like, but it's all a blur for you, and now your life is like about all of this like important work, and it must be silly to think, I mean, like, you have to have some sort of appreciation for this reality series, even though it kind of seems silly at a time, right?
No, I'm beyond grateful for everything that I went through. And I think one of the coolest part is to have that part of my life documented, because honestly, without my sobriety and my recovery, I would never have been in a position, one, to move, to a different city, let alone across, state lines, let alone across the country. And I mean, sobriety is brought me so many amazing gifts. And again, is to be able to have all of that time on on reality television and all of that. It was honestly, there was great times. There was a lot of memories that came from it. There was obviously a lot of trials and tribulations. And it was a journey for sure. And I think it kind of, even like how I summarize people, like my addiction and alcoholism, and it kind of goes with reality television. It was like, at first it was fun. It became a lifestyle, and then it became a way of survival. And that's kind of how my addiction obviously ended up taking over and taking my life down. But it's so awesome to be able to look back and reflect on these things and to see the growth and to see the change, because also too, in 2005 to 2010, addiction and mental health, obviously people struggled with it, but it is not nearly, or was not nearly as talked about as it is today. And the education and the resources and the knowledge and the research that we have around it, it's completely taken off. And again, unfortunately, I mean, look, whoever's alive today, 50% of the population is going to experience a mental health crisis. I mean, it's a very alarming. I mean, the fact that, substance abuse is the leading cause of death in America for 50-year-old individuals and younger. It's alarming. The fact that the average age of first-time use in the United States is 11 and a half years old. It's scary. I mean, you got to see like the things that we're approaching. It's alarming. And when you look at addiction, mental health, overdoses, suicides, I mean, for the last 20 years, it's just been on a steady incline, and more needs to be done about it. And I think for me, it's like, I've been in this position through this journey, through all of this, and through the shows, through all this, it's got me to this place to really understand and establish a purpose and a passion. And it is around addiction. It's not just me. Half my family struggles with some form of mental health and or addiction. And so to be on the side of champion for it and understand that people can recovery, sobriety is possible, and you can have a completely different life is what I'm wanting to show, and again, it's the best part. And I'll close with this on the sobriety, this statement is like, the best thing sobriety has done for me is, like, in God's honest truth, looking you dead in the eyes, is like, I got to know myself again. Like, that was the most beautiful thing, because I'd lost sight of who I was for so long. And a lot of people, it's like, dude, people that struggle with addiction, like, there's no such thing as recreational use of heroin, doing meth, drinking a bottle of vodka every day. Like, these people are and I'm not justifying for the behaviors, but I'm saying these people are in a miserable, miserable place. And I think it's so important to understand that, like, for somebody to have to do that to get through each day excuse me, but it's a pretty shitty existence. I mean, I've been there, and it's challenging. And so,
because it's hard to see outside of that, though, and it's scary. It's scary to have to deal with yourself or get to know yourself, or like, there's so much fear in it. Or even like, I try to normalize, like, I'm on antidepressants. I go to a therapist. I deal with certain things, and I try to talk about that. And that's why I so appreciate what you do, because it really does help people. And like if this dude's brave enough to do this, if he's able to talk openly about it, and his life has proven to be positive for this, maybe I could potentially do that too. And I was wondering, like, the first time when you started in this, what was the final moment that, like, you know what, I need help?
I mean, dude, that's a fully loaded question.
Well, yeah, by the way, maybe not a great question. We only have a couple more minutes, but it's all right.
I actually am good for another like 15 minutes. So
okay,
I just got notifications to push. But when it comes, like, so there was multiple times. I mean, let me start the conversation by saying, and I don't recommend this, and I'm not necessarily proud of it, but I mean, I went to 13 different treatment centers from Florida to Hawaii, every state in between, was arrested a bunch of times. And I'd say, like, in the beginning, the first, bout with all this stuff, I was not in a place of surrender. I was not willing to get open and honest. I was in complete denial. I was willing to appease courts. I was willing to appease girlfriends. I was willing to appease parents. Like, there was never this full, like, commitment to it. And I mean, it took me a lot of heartache and a lot of struggle to get to that place. But I'll say, like, what my moment of clarity was. And again, as you have to understand, my addiction not only took me to contemplation, but I've actually, tried attempting suicide. I mean, it robbed me of everything I had. I mean, there's so much there. But the moment of clarity is when I was in a therapist's office yet again. I don't know how many times I'd been there with my parents. And, it was towards the end of all this stuff. And it was after the suicide. Things were actually not, I don't remember the exact context of it, but it was after all this stuff happened. And I'll never forget sitting there with my mom and my dad. And, my dad just kind of looked over, and I've never seen him break down besides when his mom had passed away. And he's like the patriarch of our family and just always, the backbone and always there for us. And he's had a tear running down his face. And he's like, Jason, we just do not know what to do anymore. Mom and I, our marriage is struggling. We're suffering. The family's at a complete loss. It's a whole nother story about codependency, which if we had time, we could share about that. But he just looked over at me and he goes, Jason, like mom and I are just like two planks of wood lying in bed waiting for the phone call that you're dead. And for whatever reason, man, that was the moment where it was literally like a light came on. And I was like, look, I don't care enough about myself, but I love, and we had such a tight family, connection and stuff. And at that moment, and I don't know why it was this versus any other time that happened, but I was motivated and willing to go to another treatment facility again and really try to like commit this thing and do it for my family. And July 23rd, 2010 is when I ended up going and doing that. And I was actually able to obtain almost 5 years of sobriety through that journey. But after that initial 6 months that after I'd gone, actively arrested disease, got stabilized and was working a program, my life started to change, and my motivation, which was the family at first, then became my motivation. But I needed something to grab onto, because you often hear people say like, you have to want it enough. And it's like, dude, that may be the case for some, but for me, I had nothing left to give. And if it was not for my family dynamic and or the relationship that I had with them, I don't think I would be here to share that story. And so, that was the turning point. And again, it's not been smooth sailing since that moment. You know what I mean? I mean, getting up to that 5 years, I think it's really important to talk about this, is everything I had done to get to where I was at, going back to your initial question, like working a program, everything that I had done to get to where I was at, I stopped doing, working with my sponsor, going to church, working with my therapist, the small groups, except all the different stuff started to slowly dissipate. And I started focusing more on like worldly things, possession, just things that were out of importance. So they went by the wayside. Before you know it, I relapsed, went out on Adderall, and was hiding that for a long time. Ended up getting up to like, 300 milligrams or more a day of that crap. And ended up starting to drink months and months later, and was in psychosis, and all this different stuff started happening. And that whole series, which went on and off for, I don't know, over 3 years or something, back and forth, landed me at the first floor at Hoag Hospital, while my wife was giving birth at the fourth floor. And so, it's so crazy to see how all these things happen, and like looking back and really just how cunning, powerful and addiction is, and where it takes you. But I had to learn the hard way, and another thing that I'll say is that may be controversial for people is, for me personally, is I don't believe relapse is a part of recovery. I actually think it's a lack thereof, because what's predictable is preventable. And everything that I had done, like I had stated in that first 5 years of sobriety, if I look back, I can see where everything started to fall off. And there were things that I could have done to mitigate that, but it was too far down the road, because you relapse way before you ever pick up the drink or the drug. And so for me, it's like I was able to reflect and look back. And so again, going back to one of your initial questions, is I keep my program as my number one priority. And look, dude, I'm not 100% perfect with everything that I do, but I have a solid enough foundation with enough things that I do on a daily basis to keep me grounded. And the things that I don't do that I'm consistent with, I feel the repercussions of that. And it's like, dude, shit, I forgot to send out my gratitude list today. Or dude, I didn't go to the gym today. Or man, I didn't do my daily devotion. I didn't do my like, there's different things. I always do most of them, but there's ones that fall off that I'll forget, not fall off there, that I'll forget. And I'm like, man, I can feel the repercussions, because I've taken so much time and energy and dedication to implementing that into a habit for my life, where it feels different when it's not there.
But also what I love is all of this that you're learning, you're also then in a sense giving back. You're also in a sense like, hey, I'm going to help this. I want to do this good thing, or I want to tell people about this alcohol detection tool. Like there are these things where you're like actively trying to help other people. So it's like, there is not this kind of narcissistic bent where it's like just me, because, you've spoken this last half hour about also other people's journeys and where they're going. And I think, is that a part of sobriety as well, of caring about your fellow man?
A huge part. I mean, like some of the key principles to sobriety to me is all about the foundation, the fellowship you have, the relationship with God, and service. I mean, those are like, and I mean, those can break down into their own subcategories, obviously, but like from a high level, 50,000 foot view, those are the biggest things. I mean, I try to live my life on a daily basis is do something nice for somebody and don't get caught. Like, it's not about me. I mean, like, a lot of the stuff that I had done in the past was so heavily focused on me and self-centered, and it's all about what can I do for others, you know? And honestly, God has gotten me to a place where honestly, I do the next indicated thing. I try to help as much as I can, be a support system for those, let people know that they're not alone and that there's a way out. You know, and so, yes, service is a huge component of sobriety. And there's, you know, when you're in it yourself, there's nothing better to get you out of self and helping somebody else.
That's, I mean, words to live by for everybody. Hey, real quick, how did you meet your wife?
We met out. So before I got sober, we had met out at a club, which was a whole story. Ended up losing touch after that. Ended up getting like, this is
like a club in LA, like
I forget. She would know the name of it. I forget,
like
what club
Jet
it was.
or something like that. One of those.
It was It was like the day of like Ledoux and like it was that day.
Now you're talking.
God, Warwick or I forget.
Yeah.
You would know. But saw her out, and then I didn't reconnect with her until I had about like 10 months of sobriety. We ended up connecting or reconnecting through mutual friends and went on a real date. And then the rest was history, man. We've been together for like 14 or 15 years now.
I mean, can you believe the life that you've built?
It's crazy. I'm beyond grateful. She's I married above my pay grade. That's for sure. She's an incredible person. I mean, she's a huge proponent and supporter too of why I'm at where I'm at today too. You know, I mean,
you would have to be, right? You need like that support around you. I mean, obviously it's you doing the work, but you need people that understand your lifestyle.
Well, yeah. And I mean, well, like I said, we don't have the time to unpack this whole other story, but like when I relapsed, she never, you know, she was super codependent, enabling, didn't understand that. She ended up getting help for herself with codependency and things like that, which ultimately helped and shaped get me back on track to where I'm at today. Because I think people need to know is wherever there's an alcoholic or an addict, there's a codependent, and sometimes they're just as sick, if not sicker. And that was the case for us. And so we were able to get into a place of we've gone through a lot. There's, again, Lord, please don't give us any more, but you know, there's not much from from her dad dying, relapses, you know, patriarchs in our family passing, like just really hard trials and tribulations that we've faced. You know, we walked through a lot and we've done it together, but anything worth having is not easy, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. That's exactly it. I was going to ask, and now that kind of seems silly, is there any kind of world in which you would do reality television again? And I think maybe the answer is like, if it was like in terms of positive, like helping other people on their journey or something, because, you know, I wouldn't want to see you on a Hills reboot almost. Like it would almost feel like it would take up your, like if that sounds crazy, it would almost take up too much of your time when you could actually be out there helping people, unless that helped people.
Yeah, no, I mean, like the Hills did a reboot in 2019, 20, and 21.
I remember.
And, you know, there was an opportunity for us to go on and share our story and, you know, but again, the Hills is a unique show and it's specific to what it wants to do. So I would never, you know, do something like that again. But for me, which again, very grateful for all the opportunities and, you know, don't discredit them. But I think for me and where I'm at in my life now, the only type of show I would do would have to be around like substance abuse or mental health. And there's been talks about it. But if there's an opportunity again to spread awareness and you know, help continue to smash the stigma and educate people and provide solutions, I could be a part of something like that. But
yeah, and you have to do it in the right way, because I mean, I know you did Celebrity Rehab with Dr. Drew at a point, you know, and I remember back in the day watching those shows like it was entertainment and not realizing sometimes how serious it was, you know, or it is.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, like conversations like this are so enlightening, because I know there's somebody out there listening right now that potentially is dealing with something like this and that needs to hear these words today. And that's why I thank you for being so open with all of this, because like I said, I don't know you at all. And you have to, you now spend your time talking to strangers, you know, asking deeply personal questions, and you're just rolling with it. And I just really appreciate that kind of openness with the audience.
No, of course, man. And I encourage people, if there's anybody going through it, like it's about having these conversations. Like that's one of the first steps, is like you are not alone in this process, but being able to reach out and connect with somebody, remove the judgment and remove the fear and the shame that's associated with it, because you're not trying to save face. You need to save your ass here. Right. And so again, and we're just in a different world today, man. Like when I was drinking and using, the landscape is different. We didn't have fentanyl. We didn't have all this other stuff that's out there. I mean, you have people that aren't even addicts and alcoholics that are dying just because they're experimenting. And so, I mean, I'm beyond grateful. I'm not active in my addiction, especially in this day and age. But it's serious, man. Addiction is primary, it's chronic, it's progressive, and it's fatal. That's why it's classified as a disease. And I think people need to understand that. But being able to just have open dialogue, open connections with people, it's easier to go through something with somebody else than by yourself. And so I hope that if anything people can take away from this is, yes, we don't know each other but we're able to have this dialogue. And I'm not going to say it may be uncomfortable and hard at first, but it's like, man, that's the first step to that healing process, admitting that you have a problem.
Yeah. Finally then, since we've come to the end of this, we could talk to you for hours, we talk a lot about television and all of this stuff. How do you unwind? Like, do you watch TV? Do you go to movies? Do you listen to music? Like, how do you personally unwind and check in with yourself after all this kind of work that you do?
Great question, man. So actually I ended up, I'll share this because it's literally my stress has gone down about 80%. So, I got a new number. I got 2 phones now. And so you may think, okay, that's probably making more chaos, but I'm at my office and the number, like I basically, my work phone, it's my phone number that I had for the last 10 years. I basically leave this at the office now. So at 5:00, this thing is at the office. It's like a work phone. My assistant's here. We answer it Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And so one is leaving work at work is a huge thing. Right. And so, I mean, only family and a select few people have my other number, like emergency stuff. And, so that has been very, very beneficial. So, I mean, I completely disconnect. But when I get home, I'm very intentional about spending time with my kids and my wife and being with them. And then I have a night routine that I have is after we give our kids baths and get them ready for bed and stuff with my 7-year-old Delilah. And I'll be doing this with my son here soon. He's 3, he's too young to kind of comprehend what it is. But every single night before bed, I ask her 4 questions. And it's one is, what was good today? What could you improve upon? What are you grateful for? And what is your goal for tomorrow? That's really allotted us the opportunity to develop rapport and connection with one another, but it's also creating this sense of safety and trust with her as she's navigating and growing in this life that we live. To be able to have a safe place to be able to come to. And I also answer the questions with her and I'm very open with her. I mean, obviously age appropriate, but it's developed this really unique bond. We've been doing that for a while and I've seen tremendous benefit from it. And then I pray with each one of my kids before we go to bed. And then me and my wife, we'll watch, a show here or there. But before we go to bed, we do an inventory of the areas that, that we needed to improve upon, and take ownership and accountability of things that, whether it was argument with somebody or we fell short. But the most important thing is also to identify the things that we did well, to close out our day so we can kind of give ourselves grace and to identify the areas that we've done good. But what that ultimately does is when I put my head to my pillow, it allows me to have a completely fresh start in the next morning. And so I'm pretty consistent with that. I'm also incorporating reading books at night because I'm trying to take out some of the TV stuff at night. I'm reading Atomic Habits right now. If people
I read that. Yeah.
Book on chapter 7 right now, but it's the habit stacking and all that stuff has been very beneficial. And but yeah, it's not overly complex or complicated. It's really about being with the family for me right now.
Well, I'm going to get off this and call my dad and yell at him for not asking me those questions growing up at night. Like I'm going to literally you could have set me up for success. Yeah. Jason Wahler, man, this blows me away. I'm so damn proud of you. I hope your head hits the pillow tonight, proud of yourself, because I think you really are just truly inspirational, helping a lot of people. Please be my life coach. I'm going to put all of this information also about the Sober, Sure, and Safe in the show notes because this is something to check out. I think this is an important product. But man, I hope our paths get to cross somewhere down the line because this was just really fantastic. Thank you, man.
Yeah, man. Please stay in touch, brother.